Coming up on The World Today. Scientists say a cheap and widely available drug could be what we need to cure COVID-19. After declaring itself COVID-19 free, New Zealand confirms 2 new cases. Plus, South Korea considers its response to the North after it bombed the Inter-Korean liaison office in Kaesong. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Akaite Afia. We began with what scientists could be calling a breakthrough in the treatment of the coronavirus, giving rave reviews to dexamethasone, a type of corticosteroid medication used in the treatment of many conditions, including rheumatic problems, skin diseases, severe allergies, asthma, and the list goes on. Experts say it can help save lives of patients with the disease. Those in the UK, where the drug is being tried, say it cut the risk of death by 1/3 for patients on ventilators, and for those on oxygen, it cut the deaths by 1/5. Dexamethasone is part of the world's biggest trial testing existing treatments to see if they could also work for the coronavirus. During the trial, about 19 out of 20 patients with COVID-19 recovered without being admitted to a hospital. And of those admitted to a hospital, most also recover, but some may need oxygen or mechanical ventilation. These are the high-risk patients for whom dexamethasone appears to help. Let's now go to our correspondent in London, Juliana Olayinka. Juliana, thanks for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon.
It's good to see that you're doing well. Let's talk about this drug, dexamethasone. Do we know how long it has been on trial as treatment for COVID-19?
Well, this breakthrough, this announcement that was given today by the scientists is, as you rightly pointed out, a major breakthrough in the fight against COVID-19. In fact, I think, if I'm led to believe it's true, that this is the first drug that actually reduces mortality in COVID-19. This drug has been around since the 1960s. And as you quite rightly said, it has been used to reduce inflammation, but more commonly used to treat people with asthma or treat people with arthritis. We do know, of course, the whole world has been scrambling to get together some sort of vaccination to cure people that fall ill with coronavirus. And as well as trialing new drugs, a lot of people have been trialing old drugs. And this is one of those drugs that have been trialed recently. And of course, the scientists have struck gold, and it's now being seen as a huge success.
Well, as they're seeing it as a huge success, do we know how this drug, which has been described as cheap and widely available, is being part of clinical trials? Because it appears it's been around for a long time, like you did say.
Well, we do know that there have been several drugs. I think the most popular one is the hydroxychloroquine, which, of course, has been heralded by the US President Donald Trump and many other individuals. In fact, the British government decided to stockpile many of that drug purely because of how many people were raving against it. But there hadn't been any successes with that we've seen in this trial. Remdesivir, which was also used for Ebola, that's also been trialled out. But look, this is seen as great, although it doesn't exactly cure everybody. I believe it's about 1 in 8 individuals that it cures thus far. But I think one of the things that the scientists at Oxford University who were leading this trial was saying is that it is cheap. It costs £5, £35 if you are to use those 10 doses, which means it's readily available and it can be used all across the world, not just in developed nations. So yes, that's how the trial has been going on.
So you did mention as well that it is a cheaper drug, but what else do we know about the results recorded from the trial of dexamethasone?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not a scientist, and this information has just hit off the press. In fact, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has just been leading the daily coronavirus briefings, and he has been bombarded with questions by journalists, and even the Prime Minister doesn't know the answer to that question. But again, the fact that it costs £5 a dose. It has been in usage in the UK since the 1960s. So scientists are very familiar with it. They're comfortable with it. I believe they trialled it with 2,000 patients over 2 weeks, and 40% of them had success rates. We do know that the majority of people that have coronavirus do not have fatal symptoms, but those that do, if you are unfortunate enough to go on a ventilator, it's 50-50. And if you take this drug over a period of 8 to 10 days, then it will be reduced by a third. So 1 in 8 is exactly what the scientists are saying it cures. And the reason why Britain are really pushing this out first is because they have really pitched themselves as being, the first in trying to find a breakthrough, the first in trying to find success with a new vaccine. And the fact that they've had this sitting in their cupboard and they're able to use it is brilliant. And apparently there are about 200,000 of these vaccines that the British government has stockpiled. So it's ready to go.
Well, that does sound like some positive news there. So thank you so much again, Juliana, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So staying with the medication for COVID-19 treatment, the French President Emmanuel Macron and top drug maker Sanofi have announced plans to bolster domestic production of medicines as countries scramble to strengthen their healthcare industries to counter the coronavirus pandemic. Sanofi is working on 2 potential coronavirus vaccines. It said it would invest 610 million euros at 2 French sites to turn them into a hub dedicated to research, development, and production of vaccines. President Macron himself also pledged 200 million euros to help domestic research and manufacturing of medicines and said his government would announce plans on Thursday, June 18th, to bring back some drug production facilities to France. Meanwhile, in Singapore, scientists testing a COVID-19 vaccine from a U.S. firm, Arcturus Therapeutics, are planning to begin human trials of the vaccine in August after promising initial responses in mice. The vaccine, being evaluated by Singapore's Duke NUS Medical School, works on the relatively untested messenger RNA technology, which instructs human cells to make specific coronavirus proteins that produce an immune response. The mRNA approach has not been approved yet for any medicine, so its backers, which also include U.S. biotech firm Moderna, are treading uncharted territory.
There are many forms of vaccines that are skewed towards making good antibodies, but they don't make very good killer cells, right? And here, I think we have a chance of doing both. The trial will start this week. So the next couple of days, we'll get into first doses in humans. And then the idea here is that we start with a low dose and then increase until the maximum dose that we would be thinking of giving to humans anyway. And here what we're asking 2 things. One is, of course, whether it's safe. And because it's a human antibody, we think that the safety profile will be very good because it's, this is not the first time that a human antibody has been given to human. Usually the side effects are very minimal, right? Because we will recognize this as ourselves.
Well, more than 8 million people around the world now have the coronavirus as countries around the world continue to ease lockdown measures and reopen economies.
Italian cinemas have begun to gradually open as the city continues to ease lockdown restrictions. Of course, this comes with new safety rules, including leaving 2 empty seats next to each spectator and compulsory face masks. Italy has recorded 237,290 cases of coronavirus and 34,371 deaths, but continues to lift restrictions gradually. Over in Germany, the public is being encouraged to download a smartphone app setting to subdue the outbreak of new coronavirus infections. It does so by using Bluetooth to monitor close contact between people and issues a warning if one of them is positive. Public enthusiasm for the app is moderate as the country's cases reach 188,213 and death toll climbs to 8,856. Residents in Moscow are buzzing with excitement as museums and summer terraces are open for the first time in 2 months as the Russian capital rolls back coronavirus curbs. Despite continuing to record over 1,000 daily new infections, the capital city continues to roll back curbs. Despite continuing to record over 1,000 daily new infections, the capital city continues with its easing of lockdown restrictions. Moscow, which was hit the hardest by the pandemic within Russia, has recorded 208,680 cases and 3,386 deaths. Algeria's streets are filling up as the government relaxes lockdown restrictions with strict precautionary measures in place. After nearly 3 months of lockdown, taxi drivers can now take one client at a time. But the metro remains closed, leaving some unable to get to work. The North African country has 10,810 cases and 760 deaths. Meanwhile, Beijing reintroduced strict lockdown measures and rolled out a mass testing as it reported over 100 new cases over the past 5 days coming from a popular wholesale market in the capital. In response, Beijing's Fentai district has set up a temporary site to collect samples for COVID-19 nucleic acid testing for those who have recently visited the Jingfadi wholesale market.
New Zealand has today confirmed it has 2 new cases of the coronavirus, both related to recent travel from the UK, ending a 24-day streak of no new infections in the country. The country's Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says the 2 cases are women aged in their 30s and 40s from the same family. They were allowed out of their 14-day mandatory quarantine due to compassionate reasons. New Zealand lifted all social and economic restrictions except border controls last week after declaring it had no new or active cases of the coronavirus.
A new case is something that we hoped we wouldn't get, but it is also something that we expected and we have planned for. That is why we have geared up and continue to gear up our contact tracing at a local level and national capacity and capability, as well as having our excellent testing capability so we can respond rapidly. Just to reiterate that if an exemption is granted, there has to be a very thorough plan that's pre-approved to help manage the risk. The only other thing I will say in this instance, the women did everything that was asked of them, and they through their travel and through what they did down here and in going and get tested. What I have asked for from today is that anyone being released for a compassionate exemption is tested and there is a negative test result received and confirmed before they are released.
And this happened earlier today. North Korea blew up a joint liaison office with the South near the border town of Kaesong. It comes after the North renewed its threats of military action at the Korean border.
The Korean peninsula has been rocked by a wave of unrest in recent weeks as North Korea announced that they will sever ties with South Korea in an initial move towards shutting down all contact with Seoul.
2020년 6월 9일
Please confirm if this is the first time that North Korea did not answer a regular call since military communication lines were restored in 2018.
North Korea began lashing out against their southern neighbor, threatening to close an inter-Korean liaison office and end other projects with South Korea if defectors refuse to cease sending leaflets with critical messages on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, including his human rights abuses. Those threats are no longer idle as North Korea blew up and destroyed the inter-Korean liaison office in its border town of Kaesong after announcing that its army was ready to enter the demilitarized zone. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in urged North Korea to revisit talks aimed at peace.
한반도는 아직은 The Korean Peninsula is not in a position to freely move forward with our own willpower yet. We will need to get the support from international society, even if it slows us down. However, there's definitely business that can be independently managed by South and North Korea. What is most important now is the trust between South and North Korea. We need to build up the trust with countless dialogues.
Several countries around the world, including Russia, China and Japan, are closely monitoring the rising tension in the Korean Peninsula.
North and South Korea are the same people. As a close neighbor, China has always hoped that the Korean Peninsula maintain peace and stability.
Moon Jae-in has urged Pyongyang to keep the peace agreements he reached with Kim in 2018 and return to dialogue, but the North's latest move suggests that reality may be out of reach.
In other world developments, NATO is still seeking details on U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to cut the number of U.S. troops in Germany. The U.S. president, who has harangued Germany for not spending more on defense on Monday, confirmed last week's report of a cut of 9,500 troops in what may be the first time the U.S. president carries through on threats to reduce support in Europe. Stoltenberg says he has spoken to President Trump as well as other U.S. officials and was also consulting with German Defense Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who said last week she had not been informed of the decision.
Adjustments has been part of is nothing new. We have seen significant adjustments in U.S. presence in Europe over several years. During the Cold War, we had hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops in Europe. Then we saw a significant reduction, and now again we have seen some increase. The U.S. has also made clear that exactly how and when this decision will be implemented is not yet decided, and therefore I think it is important that we now have a dialogue within NATO on this issue. It's a bilateral arrangement between the US and Germany, but of course it matters for the whole alliance.
South Korea is threatening to sternly respond if North Korea continues to raise tensions between them. Let's talk to Professor Bola Akintarinwa, the Director General of Balitag Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, to understand what's been going on in the region. Professor Akintarinwa, thank you for joining us on the program.
It's much delight.
So tell us, what do you make of North Korea's latest action?
I want to believe that it is the crescendo of intolerance. Intolerance of what you have rightly pointed out, of the leaflets coming from South Korea, and which are generally anti-North Korea. They don't like that, and that's a major factor. It is an expression of the movement from crisis to the level of conflict, with the ultimate probability of getting to the level of war. It is also a signal that North Korea is prepared for the worst scenarios. A question, particularly to renew discussions on the stalled nuclear negotiations, particularly with the United States. And more importantly, I want to believe that North Korea wants, by use of force, to occupy some areas in the demilitarized zone. So in this case, we should distinguish between expressed reasons for the increasing tension and remote reasons. So the issue of South Koreans sending anti-North Korean leaflets is manifest, but the issue is that North Korea has another agenda that has to be attended to internationally.
Well, these tensions have been building in the region in recent weeks. Is this a deliberate attempt by North Korea to cut off the South? And why do you think the North has been trying to escalate the situation with South Korea?
I want to argue that it is very, very deliberate, and for two obvious reasons. The first reason is that I alluded to it, you too alluded to it, is the issue of the leaflet. North Korea complained about that, indicated and told South Korea to stop its citizens from sending what they have described as obnoxious leaflets. So in this case, a notice was given already. The second reason is that the sister to the leader of North Korea herself made it clear that they will certainly strain relationship if the Blue House Authority in South Korea does not do something concrete. So in this case, I think it is quite deliberate. More importantly, the issue of unification talks between the two Koreas. North Korea doesn't want interference, external interference. North Korea wants the discussions to be at the level of South Korea and North Korea only. So in this case, these are some of the explanations. And I will submit that the attitude of North Korea actually is an aggravated response, to the issue of leaflets. If, for instance, the issue is that they are sending leaflets that are against, you need not destroy an office meant to coordinate, efforts after unification. The office itself is located on the territory of North Korea. So to go there and completely bastardize and destroy that one, that is to say that, look, North Korea is prepared for something we are not yet discussing.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us today, Professor Akinterunwa.
Thank you. It's my delight.
And as we end the program today, let's check in on Egyptian engineer Mahmoud Al-Komi, who has designed a remote-controlled robot that can take swabs from patients, restrict interaction, and limit exposure amid the coronavirus outbreak. He had in mind to create something to help medical staff with their work without risking infection from patients. After more than a month's work, his current prototype is able to measure temperatures, take PCR mouth swabs, recognize faces that aren't covered in masks, and advise people on proper health care. While his second prototype proved successful, Al-Komi says that a third version is currently under works and will be able to take nose swabs as well as more accurately mirror a doctor's hand movements. Al-Komi hopes that hospitals and clinics can make use of his invention, limiting the interaction in what are usually dangerously condensed spaces. Well, that's all for the world today. I'm Akaite Afia. Stay safe.